between two states has fascinated writers for scripts ever since the sand script in a sand dune. Example, Dracula turning to ash, devoid of an interior. Whereas with a witch in The Wizard of Oz, melting interior into an interior, vaporization and incineration, both endpoints but starts of embodiments. Would encumber the difference of an IQ disintegrating or incinerating. That's no different than what a physical time clock would induce into a material when they're smashed together at high rates. The times of two things are never the same. Yo-yo when it's inside of a sleep state. These are all motion blurs, but like the internet, when it was sparking up, the pins and cores, you would hear it on dial-up. Assuming the things in all those three stories is the archetype of what Candyland is, because they're all like sugar-based. Hit by a lightning bolt, if your body was moving 40 miles per hour, same as staying in a tanning bed and becoming fossilized over a certain amount of time, that's what would happen. You would mummify. There was like a video game that lapsed and it was breaking. That's the same. Black and white instead of color. Just as the same notion of a contracept can be a delete button if you don't know what you're pressing or how it's being pressed. If there's a Jurassic Park in the modern days, it would be from someone able to create animalities to make there was a certain pendulum swing if a pendulum was relative to all the neutrinos that's ever passed Earth. An object, and this was no different than the exoskeleton of an entire thing, accounting for an interior. So one reason that you would be inside of a compartment wouldn't be that you couldn't get to the other places. It would just be that it would break if you open the compartment. Look at a chassis or spokes on wheel versus unable to look at them because it would break if you did. That's the difference of if you were like literally not able to see one or the other, then that's no different than being in an enclosure. In Candyland, if like a guy was turning you into his candy canes or like fluff of like cotton candy, that's worse than going into a paint chipper like what Leatherface would do and then like make leather out of the skin inside of the chipper. And that's what Leatherface would do. Or if the recipe for a candy cane was the same as a caliber pistol, which one would it be? You would get hit with a stick. City planners and home decorators are real interesting that they would make decisions based off their country if that was a default position. The default position would be nothing different than explaining why some houses have signs and others don't. And some of them aren't even in chronological order, and as more random going down a road than it is particles inside of a river if you're trying to count them in chronological order, because they aren't doing that in straight lines either. The construct of a center valence is no different than someone doing computations inside of the Pentagon in the very center on a laptop. Wired spatial it isn't, but it gives you a great perspective of what a central orbital would encumber if it were you inside of an arena. There's different ways where you can get stuck, and if you're stuck inside of an arena, the Pentagon could be one of them. And if you're on your computer and you could not be taken out, what is the safest programs you would run in there in order for no one to collapse the walls around you above or below? If there was a Jurassic Park in the modern days, it would be from some ninja who was from another realm being able to create animalities to make confusion. It would have to be of the atmosphere of the Jurassic era, where there was a certain pendulum swing if a pendulum was relative to all the neutrinos that's ever passed Earth. where it was an area all about the globe that persists with any of the dinosaurs back then, with rendering any of the possible places they could be currently. And this ninja was able to become a frog in it, and there was all these different types of animality dinosaurs that would have been of a T-Rex for this other character. Just so that there could be one dinosaur that was so bad it persists throughout space-time, and then probably just one sandworm that persists throughout space-time. The king of the dune worms, and then Leviathan of the ocean in the Bible and doomsday scenario. So this would be when it would have to have occurred that Nightwolf and Jason Voorhees was in Jason X in outer space, and Nightwolf was just in a Mortal Kombat timeline. In order for Leviathan to have occurred, so then in the Jurassic era, Ermac would have had to make heirs, so that there could have been one dinosaur that was Leviathan out of all of them that could have still existed. And that's the part where at any point of time we can make a Jurassic Park of the DNA, and it would be the same timeline that Ermac would have to get off in MK11 before a Nightwolf comes back from outer space into Earthrealm. So the internet and the computer is one thing, and then your body and your mind are a different thing. What's one relation that you could take, interplay, that would be embodiment incorporating the two devices, processing units similarly? The Titanic, for one, is a vessel underwater being kept because it's at the very bottom of the ocean bed, so no hydrogen is dissolving it. Hydrogen which would dissolve a body if it wasn't embalmed properly. But when a bacteria has been placed onto the Titanic, which it has, it eats it away slowly, and so it'll not be part of a body, and it'll be disintegrated into the ocean bed in a few more years. Your body, if it was hit by a poison dart, if that dart was so strong, equivalent to the bacteria size that is eating up the Titanic, your body would start to dissolve, and that's what snake bites do to your muscle tissue. It disintegrates it and turns it into goo. But what if a poison dart did that to your body and it was 10 times quicker? That would be equivalent to the Titanic being ate up, which is the same dynamic, but just in a different fashion. How strong is a processing unit in a computer is called its CPU, and that's equivalent to how much drag, which is stopping power, in a chassis when you're completely dependent on the wheel if you're ghost riding the whip. Let me explain. The steering component moves a chassis, and the spokes of the wheels are on an angle horizontal to perpendicularity of its verticality, meaning each spoke, if it's vertical up into the steering wheel, at any given moment, if you release your hands from the steering wheel, it's going to make the brakes have a different proportionality of stopping power. And this is again how much drag and wind resistant is put on the chassis, which is what holds the frame of the engine, because you're just moving your car's engine in order to go forward. That's what the wheels of the spokes of the wheels are correlating through. But the steering wheel in particular is a diagonal from the chassis into the spokes, just how a computer's CPU, center processing unit, of old computers sounded like it was grinding, like the internet when it was sparking up the pins and cores. You would hear little tunes of the internet on dial-up. This cracking is also heard in a bike if it has its chain not quite straight and its pedals kind of disjoint when it's squeaking and crunching during pedaling. You can switch gears, and this is when your chain goes of a free motion into a different range equal to jumping off of sleeping, of a jump off sleeping yo-yo when it's inside of a sleep state. These are all motion blurs but handled with mechanical devices over a slower amount of time. All related to ghost riding the whip. These motion blurs are an occurrence when different things happen, such as using camouflage, a cape over yourself in order to look like a rock or invisible. This is what Frodo and Harry Potter did, versus a monolith, a circle around yourself, which was what Gandalf did when he said to the fire shadow thing that you shall not pass. He literally broke the area about him so that nothing could get through, because he was a monolith using a staff as one.